So these are the new 51s that I've recently got via eBay. And this one and this one needed some TLC, or in this case, I swapped a cap. It came with a demi-sized cap, which is a little shorter, which fits and everything, is functionally correct with it. It just looks funny. So I had a demi that I swapped this cap to put on this pen. So this pen is more or less correct. This is an early VAC filler, so it has the early clip. And my hand, look at my hands. And I just filled it with water, so it has a little bit of its undissolved Parker turquoisey ink in it, or whatever kind of ink it was last filled with in 1952 or something. Unsure. My time machine isn't that accurate. This cap that I put on it is quite a rare cap. It's a silver colored cap. It's not sterling, but it is silver in color, and it has those vertical lines, so lucky me. This pen came in a different lot, though the last two lots I had these pens in it, but this was a different lot. And this is a Aerometric 51, and it had a number of things wrong with it. Not so much wrong, but just missing, I guess. The cap was missing its clip, and it had lots of nasty dings on it, so I imagine some trauma happened to it. So I had a cap that I put on it. The nib also was sort of weirdly fit into the pen, so it looked like it was bent down. I can't even remember now exactly what was wrong with it. It worked fine, it just looked funny. And when I straightened the nib, which looked as if it had been made straight and it had been bent. There was trauma to the nib. When I straightened it to the degree that I could, it was not flowing as well. And so after quite a number of tries, you can watch me on an earlier video try them all out. I found this nib, which is really, really great to go in this pen. And this is a nib that's really, really fine and flows very well. So I'm very happy with this pen, and I'm happy with this pen. The earlier lot also had this pen, which has this big chunk of iridium on the end, so it's a big, smooth ball. And normally, I'm not fond of those kinds of nibs, but it just is so, it's kind of nice to scribble with, which is what I'm doing here, scribbling with a pen that has a blob of iridium on the end. It's not really speaking to me. All I want to do is just scribble. I mean, this is the pen equivalent of a homeless person, maybe on the street, who is talking about he's one of those crazy homeless people, not just, a perfectly functioning human that, because of the fucked up economy, doesn't have a job anymore and lost his house and is, he's homeless. It's more one of those people that should have be in an institution. He's not harmful. He's just a public nuisance. And that's what this pen is like. It just seems to want to make noise without actually saying anything. I think I would have a hard time trying to write a letter with this pen, only because it just wants to do this. It's not making pretty lines. It's just, is there an automobile equivalent, Pierre Gustafson? I'm asking you that. It's like a gas guzzler. And, you think of gas guzzling cars. You think of, it's like a Humvee. Is that what it's like? A Hummer? Just noisy and uses a lot of gas. I haven't quite figured it out. But these kinds of nibs, when I have them in a pen, Johnny OneNote that's relatively loud, I find that they're fun to push around, but they don't want to ever tell me anything, or they don't want me to ever write anything. It's a very strange thing. So I loved this pen up until 10 minutes ago when I was comparing it with these other ones. So I'll probably sell this one. This one here is one that I just, again, immediately fell in love with, because it was like this one, a big blobby nib. And I thought, okay, I really like this. But it's fine when I'm sitting here scribbling. I took these pens out drawing the other day, and they were not functioning for me well. There was some quality to them that I was not happy with. But I know that both of these pens would make someone very, very happy, because these nibs are really smooth without being polished. They're really broad without being shaped by, someone with a grinding wheel at their pen table, who are often asked by customers to, can you make this nib is too fine? Can you make it broader? Sure. And then they, cut off a chunk of the iridium and polish it very smooth, and it can write like this. Well, this writes like this already. So come to my table, buy this one and this one, because these are both probably be for sale. But I changed my mind. I'm my best customer as well. I might hand this pen to you and think that I really like it. And then I'll say, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm fixing this pen for someone. I got mixed up. Or if you're buying a pen from me and I say something like that, you probably know that I don't want to sell it to you because I want to keep it. But these days, I do want to start selling some more of these, because if I'm not going to actually use it to create something, I can do this all day long and I'm relatively happy. But I'm not ever going to, what would I write with this? What did I say I would write with this last time on my last video when I was saying how great it was? This is the pen Jackie Gleason would use. To the moon, Alice. Okay, the last 51 I got was this one, and this one I do want to keep. it's very strange. It has the owner's name written 3 times. It's written here in very faint type, and it's very smooth, and you can barely feel it, and you can barely see it. So I have a feeling that this was the original engraving. And then for some reason he wanted to have it engraved bigger and better. So he had this put in, and these are very crisp. It's like they were engraved yesterday, both of them. They were both engraved at the same time. And maybe one day this is what I'm going to guess. I'm going back in time. I'm playing my Sherlock Holmes. And if this guy had come into my 221B Baker Street address and said, I've heard about in that Strand magazine, your friend Watson over there made up this stupid story about you being able to tell him all this information about him by looking at his watch. That's a bunch of balderdash. And then Holmes would say, tut, tut, tut. I see you've been married 3 times and you have 6 prostitutes you've been dealing with. And one of them was a man, he'd say. And so he would hand Holmes this pen, and Holmes would say something like, this is what he would say. I'm now looking at the pen and coming up with my theory. So Walter got this pen, and he used it quite a bit for a number of years, and then he misplaced. He didn't lose the cap. The cap was somehow misplaced. Maybe he was filling it, put the cap on the table. Maybe there was an earthquake. The cap went rolling under the credenza, and it was lost for many years. And Walter, after the earthquake, Walter used the pen, couldn't find the cap, threw the pen in the drawer, and then later when he found the cap, now this story isn't right. Holmes is wrong in this case. He lost the cap elsewhere, and then it got dinged up. It fell off out of his pocket when he was on the I was going to say the Graf Zeppelin, but that had been dismantled by the time this pen came out. In the streetcar, somewhere in the train car, I don't know, it got in the smoker on the train car. Somehow this thing fell down and it got kicked around, and he couldn't find it. And he, tipped the porter $1 to go back to the smoking car to look under every single seat to try to find it. And eventually he found the cap, and it had been dinged up. And he decided, as soon as he got off the train, he would go to the jeweler and have the jeweler engrave both the cap and the pen with his name really big so he could find it and it could be returned to him. And then he died because it's not worn down. Then he died, and this was put in the desk. Of course, Sherlock Holmes would not be able to tell this story. Oh, he's telling the story to this guy's son. Tell me about my father's pen. So that's what he said about his father. This thing, the demonstrator feed, that's that's a question mark. Was this guy, Walter, did he work for a pen company? Did he work for Parker? Did he fix pens? Did he work at a pen shop? Why is this clear? I recently bought a pen from my neighbor here in Brick Bottom who inherited his father's pens. He and his brothers split them up. His brothers got some Parker 75s, and my friend got two Parker 61s, and one of them had a clear demonstrator hood shell. And I said that these pens were given mainly, they weren't sold to customers, they were given to pen dealers to show how innovative the feed and shell were, and nib and everything. And he said, "Oh, my father worked for Parker. He was the head Parker guy for Asia." And I've known this guy for years. Did he ever tell me that before? Never. He's known I collect pens. He never told me that. So it was just very weird. So this thing would normally be sitting on the counter at a pen shop, and you'd go into the pen shop and they'd try to sell you one of these pens, and they'd want to explain how innovative they were without having to take it apart. So how this one got here, maybe Walter was a Parker salesman, but you'd think if he lost a cap, he could easily get a new one without having to have his name engraved all over it. So it's a mystery. It's a little tiny bit of a mystery, but I really like it. That I like it all the better because his name was typeset here. Now this could be. Here's another possibility. Let's say Walter R. Schwind was a pen salesman in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Let's say pick a state, and this was his pen, and his son inherited it, and after the father died, so this guy was named, Walter R. Schwind Sr., even though when he bought the pen, he didn't have the child at that point. So he didn't have need for this name. He bought the pen. Here's their timeline. He buys the pen, has it engraved. Later on, he has a child. So now he's referred to as Walter R. Schwind Sr. He wasn't that before because he didn't have a child. And he didn't have his name legally changed. Senior is not part of your real name. It's not a legal part of your name. And hi, Todd Merrill is on the thing. I'm wondering why, Todd, this pen has Walter Schwind in typed here and then later engraved gaudily, rather largely with cursive lettering, both on the cap and barrel. And they're very crisp engravings. So this pen had not been used much after it was engraved. And it also has a clear demonstrator shell. So my theory is Walter Schwind, this one that had this one typed, sold pens. And I'll just pick Kenosha, Wisconsin. So he had a demonstrator. He sold pens at a pen shop. And his name was Walter Schwind. Later on, he had a son who he named Walter R. Schwind because he doesn't have much imagination. And then he started using the name Senior because his son was Junior. And Senior and Junior are not legally part of your name. It's not on your birth certificate, or it shouldn't be. And really, they're only used while both of them are alive. They're not used when unless it's a famous person and maybe they're both dead, or they might be both alive. John F. Kennedy, if he wasn't assassinated and lived another 20 years, and his son was John Kennedy, John Jr., and they both were, visiting whorehouses. Oh, did you mean senior or junior? Oh, I meant senior. Or if they were in the news a lot, they would specify by junior and senior, but that was not part of his name, because when John F. Kennedy was born, he didn't have a son, so he couldn't possibly be a senior. So senior and junior are just, we'll call them footnotes, and they're not part of your name. So when this guy dies, and let's say he never was famous, he only sold pens, his son, who was the forgetful one, always leaving his caps and his left shoe places at the whorehouses when he was visiting. He would always leave something. He would have everything engraved. So he took this pen that was his father's. Now he owns it, and he re-engraved it with his name. And within a few minutes of him re-engraving this, perhaps even on his way home, he was hit by a bus and died. And then his son, who's also named Walter R. Schwind, and they might have legally added the third on that one. Maybe he inherited this and then sold it on eBay, and I bought it. So that's my theory. So what did Todd say? Let's read what he said here. That reminds me of a very funny and disturbing character portrayed by John C. Reilly called Dr. Steve Brule, and his mother actually named him that. Doctor is actually his first name. I see. But if is his name Dr. period, or is it Doctor? It's like major from Catch-22, where Major's father was only a corporal or whatever was underneath a major, but always wanted to be a major and never was a major, so he was Corporal Major. So he named his son Major. But he, for some reason, I can't remember why, he named his first name Major as well as his middle name. I was calligraphing people's names at a farmer's market a few years ago, and I was mentioning, there's all sorts of very fancy spellings for names that were relatively understood are spelled a certain way. A Stephanie with a PH or an F and an IE or a Y, or is Johnny with an H or just two N's? Or an H and two N's? Anyway, there was a teacher that we were discussing names, and she was talking about names that were popular these days, which often have convoluted spellings. And she says, I have a student named Ladasha. Eldasha. And I said, oh, how do you spell that? And Eldasha. Is that how you spell it? Eldasha? She said no, and I tried another one. So is it Eldasha with an H at the end? Oh, I did an H there. Two L's and then no H, or two L's, or what? Eldasha is, and her name was spelled L dash A. Just how it sounds. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. And then I thought about it and why is it stupid? Because is your name Eldasha or is it L minusa, L subtracta? L hyphena. Is your name L hyphena? L hyphena. So anyway, are you looking forward to coming here, Todd Merrill? What I would like to do maybe with you and Mick and Scott is have you come to my house and I'll go to the gallery, I'll put up a table, and maybe we can do a live stream with the four of us all playing with pens on Friday night or Saturday night, or maybe even Sunday night. I get so worn out by a one-day show just because I'm sick to death of pens, if you can imagine that. After dealing with them for a day, I just want to take a shower and go to bed. But now we have a 2-day show and people are arriving on Friday. So are you going to be here on Friday? Because I think Friday night would be the logical time for it. So someone yesterday also was asking me, why don't I, he saw me talk about 51s and he said, why don't you talk about the Skylines? And I love Skylines. I've always loved Skylines. I used to really, really love them. Even when I hated 51s, I didn't understand how 51s were so good. I had to learn that. And I love Skylines. The issue with Skylines to me is, though, they're not as solidly built as this. There's a couple of flaws that they often have. One is the gold fill cap that's cemented onto a plastic under cap often is loose or is completely unhooked. So there's a little weakness there that bothers me. The other part is they made the sections and feeds and nibs, they're also different from each other, that they're not as easy to exchange. You really can't do that with a 51 either, as I found out the other day when I tried to put a different nib in here. Only one nib worked. And you'd think, well, what's the difference? It's just a Johnny one-note nib, but they're all slightly different. And but in this case, they either write or they don't. With a 51, they might write, or a Skyline, they might write, but they might be loose, or they might not even go in. This one will assemble and not write, but the other ones, you can't put a fat feed in a small hole. But all of the parts are interchangeable here, and you put them all back together again, and it may not write. So that's pisses you off about this one. But the Skylines are unpredictable. Skylines have great nibs, some of which I like, some of which I don't like, just because it's a taste thing for me. And there's no, when you pick up a 51 and you uncap it, you have no idea what the nib is going to be like. It's a complete crapshoot. When you uncap a 51, you know that it's going to be a Johnny one-note nib. You'll know that it's going to be relatively medium to fine. You don't often find a big stub nib, so there's no surprises here. Maybe because of that, I'm not disappointed. Where if I look at a Skyline, I want them all to be a nice rubbery, flexible nib, and when they're not, I'm slightly disappointed. So that's what I see as the difference. They're both great pens. It's just that there's something about you know what you're getting when you know more what you're getting when you uncap a 51. Okay, let's see what Todd says. That would be great. I'm planning to be there sometime on Saturday. I think that there are going to be some people that will be here on Friday night. And I believe Mick will be here. Now, do we pronounce his name Mick or Mike? He told me that either work for him, but what does he like? And I can never remember. I want to say Mick because of the way he spells his name. But can you tell me, is it Mick as in Mickey, or is it Mike as in Michael? And if you use both, that's not helpful. But I know you deal with him a lot more than I do. So you might know what he prefers. I think he answers to anything. I answer to almost anything. Hey, slut! I'll hear, and I'll turn around, of course. Hey, you whore! And I'll turn around. You mean me? No. Mike. Okay, so you call him Mike. See, he's another one, like Ladasha. You know, if you want to be called Mike, don't spell your name with a Y. Anyway, if you're able to, I wish I could offer you a place to stay here. But it's really tough. I don't have a shower that functions. If you walk into the pen show and you smell lots of perfume, that's my table. It's coming from me. No, I do have use of a neighbor's shower, but I know that you had come up here planning on staying with me one year. We misunderstood each other, and you couldn't because my couch wasn't big enough for you and Nicola. And my bed isn't big enough for even me because there's too much shit on it. But it's, I mean, can I make it work for you? Are you staying at the hotel on Saturday night? I do have sometimes I do have access to other lofts in my building, and well, that's the idea. I mean, do you have a room? There may not be room for you at the hotel. Boston Fluff Festival is this weekend, and that drags all sorts of people and their brothers to Union Square. So anyway, the point is, I'm not positive you could stay here. I wish I could offer you that, but I really don't think it would be comfortable for you. But if you come on Friday, maybe I can get Mike and Scott and you and I together, and we can do a pen play live stream. You have a room for Saturday night, okay? Well, I know they're coming. I know that they're coming on Friday night. I think they're coming on Friday night. I don't even know that at this point. And we can do it on Saturday night too, if you want to. Maybe we do it after the show, but before. We could even do it at the show if they have Wi-Fi there, but I don't know if they have Wi-Fi there. It's the Holiday Inn, so they may not. It may not even work there. I could take short videos on my phone and upload them. So that might be a possibility. I just thought it would be. I mean, Mike and Scott came to my studio last year, and they really, really loved it. And we just had a great time, and maybe they tell everyone who they visit that they thought it was the best thing that ever happened to them, but I think they were telling me the truth. My place is kind of interesting. So yes, it's just that my phone, I could probably delete most of the pictures so I know that I've got time. When I do things on StreamYard, it can go for hours, as you know, and it's not taking up any space on my phone. So that's the good thing about StreamYard. Plus, people can visit and talk. I might be able to do some StreamYarding on my phone, but again, I really need Wi-Fi. So anyway, I have so much work to do, and I have been unable to function to get it done. I'm really in a very unhappy space in my life right now. I'm dealing with selling my childhood home, which has been somewhat traumatic, even if the house was empty and didn't need repairs, and I didn't have to find places for things to go that we want to keep. But we have a house full of stuff that we want to keep, and we have to figure out where it's going to go. And I've got brothers who don't want to throw it out either, but they also don't have space for a lot of it. So we may end up having to sell some things, some artwork that my father did. I don't think we have to sell the artwork, but anyway, there's some nice pieces of furniture and some objet d'art that we do want to sell, but we just don't have time to do it correctly now. So there's just a lot of trauma there. And, I have a house here that has a bathroom that doesn't work. I have the IRS called me saying that I owe them taxes. I asked for an extension, and they said that I asked for here's April 15th, here's October 15th. And you ask for an extension so you can do it then, not here. And there's some money that I inherited from my father that I didn't even know that I was issued the check. I didn't open the envelope until the day before. I thought it was just a 1099 or something, something that you get from a bank saying how much interest you got, and it was actually a check for some amount of money. So I called them up and I said, can you tell me the interest? I actually owed money on the interest I would receive between the date of my father's death and the date that the check was made. So a year and a half worth of interest on $20,000 or whatever the number was. And they said, we can only tell your broker, not you, but your broker. Well, I didn't know who the broker was, and I tried to call them and they weren't open and blah, blah, blah. So I asked for an extension. And I got a letter in the mail yesterday, like right here in the timeline, and it said, you filed too late. Well, I didn't file too late. I filed before the 15th. It went through. But evidently on June or May 15th, I was supposed to send a check for the amount of money I owe, but I haven't done the paperwork yet. How can I know what I'm supposed to send you if I don't do the paperwork? So anyway, I called them up on the phone and I said, all my papers are in Minnesota. I just haven't had time to deal with it. So anyway, it sucks. And the amount of I make so little money. I should just use cents to describe my income because I don't make dollars. I don't make enough dollars. So that most of the time these days, because of COVID and wedding invitations gone down the toilet and everything else, luckily I own my house, but anyway, I don't make enough money to really pay very much tax. So the interest on $20,000 for a year and a half, I could have lost money in the time that the account was, quote, making money or losing money. So I wouldn't have, the check would have been for $0 anyway, but I just didn't do the paperwork. So we're fucked. Anyway, send me a text if you're here on Friday. Send me a text. Don't jump through hoops, because maybe we can do this on Saturday after the we could even do it on Sunday. It doesn't really make any difference to me when we do this. I just would like to have a little bit of a thing with Mike and you, and maybe a couple of other people. So well, we both will have, I don't know, my resume hasn't been updated in ever. So anyway, look at me. I'm a mess. I'll see you all later, Todd. It was good catching you now, and we'll talk. See you later.